Hi, I'm James, and in this video I'm taking a look at what has struck me as one of the best deals that I've seen around here in the UK for the Black Friday sales happening at the moment, and this is the ASUS Vivobook A513EA laptop. This has also been being sold by Currys as the X513EA, but both laptops appear to be identical. This was purchased from AO.com and cost me £379. It was listed at £399, but there was a further £20 discount code on the website. So what are you getting for your money to make this such a good buy? Well, inside the package itself, you do not have a huge amount. We have our laptop, and then in two little compartments we have our warranty card, my ASUS details, a little envelope containing some Vivobook stickers for if you really want to spice up your laptop with those, and a very small user guide. On the other side we have our charger and power lead. Unpacking the laptop, and we have this sticker on the top advertising their My ASUS software. This basically is some power profiles and so on for quiet, long battery life or performance. So we are going to remove that, open the laptop up and take a look inside it. So for this £379 we're actually getting quite a nice specification. So this is a plastic chassis with a 15.6 inch 1080p screen. We'll take a look at that later. But basic specs are we have a Intel Core i5-1135G7 with Intel Iris Xe graphics, and we also have 8GB of RAM in a dual channel memory configuration to make the most of those Iris Xe graphics, running at DDR4 3200 speeds and a 256GB NVMe type SSD. This is paired with Windows 10 Home, so not Windows 11. This is clearly shifting through some existing stock with Windows 10 installed, and this is not in S mode, it is the full version. Aesthetically, I quite like this machine. It has a sort of blue finish to the plastic, and it's quite a smooth finish, so nothing too textured. One thing that is a bit of an interesting choice is we have like this fluorescent yellow around the enter key. Not too sure on that. Otherwise, bezels are relatively thin. They are not the smallest I've seen, but we do not have too much down on the chin, on either side or at the top. Obviously this is a little thicker at the top to accommodate the webcam. Most of the ports on the laptop are actually on the right side. Typically you see on most laptops I look at, they're on the left. However, here we have on the right side our power, HDMI, USB 3.2 Gen 1, so 5 gigabits per second, a USB-C port which does not support DisplayPort or USB power delivery, so you cannot charge or output video through this port with the testing that I did. It is purely a USB-C port, and also a micro SD card reader. Flipping the laptop around, and we can see that we have two USB 2 ports on this side. These are not, as far as I can gather, USB 3, so if you are attaching a hard drive or SSD to the USB port, ensure you attach it on the right hand side. These will be fine for devices like webcams, mice and so on. Opening the laptop up, and we can see that the hinge does not lift the base of the laptop up at all when opened, a feature that we see particularly on some modern Dells now, and this opens to around about 120 to 130 degrees, so it's not a display which is going to lay flat or rotate around. Speaking of the display, this is a full HD 1080p 15.6 inch panel. It features IPS display type, so should give good viewing angles, even obviously a little tricky with the lighting in here to capture it with the camera, but you should find as you rotate the laptop you still get fairly good colour reproduction. The gamut for this is 45% NTSC for colour, and brightness is rated to 250 nits. So not the brightest panel in the world, but for the price point, pretty good. It is an IPS type display and not TN, which you will find on some lower cost laptops. This does have a anti-glare finish, but being only 250 nits, you'll probably find that if you're using this in very bright lighting, it will wash out somewhat, just because of a lack of backlight brightness. So something more suited to indoor than outdoor usage. And obviously this is not a touchscreen, as it does not have the glass front to it or any kind of touch built in. Looking at in-pad devices, and first of all the touchpad, it isn't huge for a 15-inch laptop at 100mm wide and 70mm tall, but it has a nice feel to it. It's very smooth under the finger and seems responsive, and supports all the regular multi-touch that you'd expect on a Windows laptop. So we have our usual taps and so on. Not too much to say about it. In the use that I've had, it's been absolutely fine. What we do have more to say about is the keyboard. There are some nice features on this and some things I'm not so sure about. Anyway, mostly good on the keyboard. It's a fairly regular chiclet design. I have no real objections with the way HP lay this out for the UK English market. What is interesting is it all looks quite busy. We have a lot of keys marked where you can use various accents, which might be useful for people who are also working in a foreign language. Not too useful normally for sort of UK English use, but you know, it's just some markings on the keyboard. It doesn't affect the usage. Just a little visual thing where it's unusual to see those on this region's keyboards. Looking at in-pad devices, and first of all the touchpad, it isn't huge for a 15-inch laptop at 100mm wide and 70mm tall, but it has a nice feel to it. It's very smooth under the finger and seems responsive, and supports all the regular multi-touch that you'd expect on a Windows laptop. So we have our usual taps and so on. Not too much to say about it. In the use that I've had, it's been absolutely fine. What we do have more to say about is the keyboard. There are some nice features on this and some things I'm not so sure about. Anyway, mostly good on the keyboard. It's a fairly regular chiclet design. I have no real objections with the way HP lay this out for the UK English market. What is interesting is it all looks quite busy. We have a lot of keys marked where you can use various accents, which might be useful for people who are also working in a foreign language. What is interesting, however, is some of their choices around the function keys. So what we have, obviously your fairly typical options for muting, volume, brightness. We have a touchpad disable button here. I'm not always a huge fan of these, as some people, especially where here the logo isn't necessarily the clearest on what it does, and I do occasionally get calls from people who say, oh, my touchpad isn't working, and it turns out they've hit the function key for it. I believe F7 here would normally be for the backlight. There is no backlight on this model, but I believe that it is supported. Likewise, there is no fingerprint sensor on this particular model, but I believe that ASUS do offer versions of this with a fingerprint sensor, which would normally be here on the touchpad. F8 is actually for the second monitor options. Again, I don't like that symbol. I don't think it's particularly clear what it's doing. It looks like it's monitor input, which is strange. We have an option to lock the screen, disable webcam. This one here is for the snipping tool, so for taking screenshots. I suppose that's a nice feature to have. And then the last one, again, I'm not too sure why this is here, launches the My ASUS application. To be honest, having a dedicated button for that when it's something I'd probably uninstall, not too keen on that, but sure, why not? One thing that is nice, however, is we do have, so if we press function escape, we have a function lock. So we can, this doesn't change like the defaults for at, a, or give us the accents, but what it does change is the defaults for these. So normally you find on most laptops, if you want to swap this between defaulting to volume and so on in the hotkeys, and want to go back to F1, F2, F3, and so on, then that's a BIOS option. However, on here we have this function lock, so we can just use that key combination to alternate between the two, and that's quite a nice choice. So a few minor quibbles with the keyboard, but really in general usage I've not had any problems with it. Just some odd hotkey choices. To be honest, I would probably have the function lock on most of the time, as I like to keep that as so. You do find, so yeah, if you're holding down Alt and do F4, even without the function lock on, it's not going to start trying to change your brightness. It is smart enough to go, okay, they want to use F4 for the function key. But things like for refreshing your web browser, I tend to prefer to just have that on. I will look and see if it's a BIOS option where I could just switch that as the default. Looking at the Windows install, and first of all, just seeing the pre-installed software from ASUS. So if we go into Applications, and there is not a great deal besides what you'd expect from a fresh Windows install. We do have McAfee pre-installed, which of course I would be removing immediately. I am not a fan of McAfee. Then we have the My ASUS software and the Realtek audio console for the sound. So really not a great deal beyond what you would find in a standard Windows install. The My ASUS application includes some options for support and diagnostics, and also for some customization of the machine. It does ask you to log in, but you can just skip that if you do not wish to create an ASUS account. So here we can see the front screen gives you some information on the machine itself. We have diagnostics, which can take us through some of the options, and then we have options for charging, performance mode, screen settings, and the function lock, which we can also do through the key combinations, and some of the other bits that you may wish to change on the machine. Looking at the Windows information, we can also see that this ships with Windows 10 Home and the 20H2 version, so not the latest feature update, which is 21H2 now, I believe. Loading up some basic applications to confirm the hardware specifications, and we can see this is indeed a Core i5-1135G7, and that the memory is running in a dual channel configuration at DDR4 3200 speeds. Crystal Disk Info confirms that this is a Kingston M2 2280 SSD, and this is an NVMe PCIe 3 4x device, with 256 gigabytes of storage. However, when we look in the Crystal Disk Mark performance, we see that this is only getting around 1.6 gigabytes per second for read performance and just under 1.3 for write. So this isn't terribly impressive for an NVMe drive, but the real benefit in these kinds of drives is the responsiveness. And given the price point of the machine, I don't think this is a real sticking point. It's not going to be one of the fastest SSDs. It's obviously a fairly basic, I assume, QLC type drive, but this is what you would expect at this price point. And then if we open up the wireless information, we can see this is an Intel 9462AC wireless card, so Wi-Fi 5. I believe this is running a 1x1 aerial configuration. So only a single antenna connected. Now ASUS do offer this machine with Wi-Fi 6 and a 2x2 antenna configuration, so I will be checking to see if that second antenna is present in all machines and whether that could be connected if you fit a Wi-Fi 6 card. The battery life on this machine, when I was running it on battery for just basic usage, so web browsing and similar, it was suggesting it would be around the 7 to 8 hour mark. This is running in the balanced performance mode, so you may find better if you run in the whisper mode, which will reduce power consumption to reduce heat and noise. Getting inside this laptop isn't actually the easiest job, as there is quite a tight fit of the base. However, once inside, we can see we have the M2 2280 drive here. It's inside a bit of a sheath and has a heat pad on the back of the chassis to help transfer heat away from it. We also have the single DIMM slot, so we have this one 4GB module here which could be upgraded, but the other 4GB is on the board. And finally we have the Wi-Fi NG-FF card here, which is a 2-antenna design, unlike what I first thought, and so could be replaced by a Wi-Fi 6 card like the Intel AX200 to upgrade that as well. So to access the device's BIOS, we're going to turn it on and then keep pressing the F2 key, and that will boot us into this visual BIOS, very similar to ASUS's laptops. On the front screen here, we'll see there's not a huge amount of options. We can set passwords and we can change boot priority. We can also see CPU fan speed and temperature and battery status and information about the spec of the laptop itself. But if we go into advanced mode, you'll see here it gives us more information about the system. We can also then go into here, we can disable the touchpad, we can toggle the function lock to be on or off by default. We can switch on or off Intel hyperthreading for the processor, virtualization and AES-NI encryption instructions, as well as VTD. We have the ASUS Easy Flash 3 utility for flashing the BIOS, and some options around Intel Rapid Storage technology. We can also go in and enable or disable the smart self-test for the hard drive, not that there is one installed. We can enable or disable the UEFI for network stack. Same, we can turn on the booting of USB mass storage devices. And we can also decrease from the default 64 megabytes the pre-allocation of graphics memory for the integrated graphics down to 32 megabytes. We can't increase it above 64, however. There is also VMD. I'm not sure what that is, but there is an option there for that. When it comes to booting, we can disable fast boot, and if we go into secure boot, we can turn off secure boot, but there is no option that I'm aware of for legacy mode booting. You have to do UEFI booting on this board. We also, besides the password options here, have some options for I/O security. So we can turn off wireless networking and Bluetooth. We can turn off audio, and we can also disable USB entirely, disable the external USB ports, disable the webcam, or disable the card reader. For security conscious users or people who say just never use the webcam, so want to just completely turn it off to prevent any unauthorized access, you have those options there. Finally, if we go to the save and exit section, there is a boot override option, so we can select to boot from a USB device or so on if it is connected. So overall, would I recommend the ASUS A513EA? Well, obviously, first thing that is a real positive for this machine is I feel it is good value for money. Certainly at what I paid for this configuration with the i5 at £380 was an absolute steal. Shipping with a dual channel memory configuration out the box is also really nice to see. Competitor laptops like the Dell Inspiron 155510 ship with a single 8GB SODIMM, whereas the 4+4 configuration ensures better performance from the Intel Iris Xe graphics. One somewhat negative point, however, is that this has the 4GB soldered to the board and only one SODIMM slot, so if you are looking to upgrade the laptop later, you will end up with an unbalanced memory configuration rather than a proper balanced dual channel configuration. For most people who keep the laptop in the standard specification, this won't be an issue, but something to consider if you have upgradeability in mind. On to the things that I don't like, and the keyboard lacking a backlight is a shame. It's a feature that a lot of people see as an essential now, and while I do believe that some models of this machine may well feature that, it is listed on the specifications page by ASUS. It's not something that is present on the models that I've seen advertised in the UK. Likewise, the lack of fingerprint reader is a shame. It's something that perhaps people see less important, but I really like having this built in for quick login. Prefer it personally to the Windows Hello Camera solutions, and it certainly speeds up certain things like authorizing passwords to log into Windows, but also sometimes for viewing passwords in Chrome and so on. So something that I would have liked to have seen included. Another area which I'm really not keen on is that while, unlike the Dell Inspiron 15-3000 series, we do get a USB-C port, this lacks DisplayPort and USB PD support, so it kind of makes it a little bit like just a worse USB port for most people, without the ability to use it for docking, so to connect your power supply, monitor and other accessories all in one cable. I see it as having a bit of a missed opportunity here. And really, the biggest issue actually is that, based at least on the UK availability here, the best deals have finished on this. AO still are listing the i3 version, which is £10 cheaper, but the i5 deal was better. I will link the AO listing for the i3 version of this, which still has 8GB of RAM and 256GB SSD in the description below, but it's a shame that that i5 version has ended. With the continuing Black Friday sales, we might find that this reappears. It is still listed as just out of stock on AO, but we'll have to see. And so with that, I'd just like to thank you for watching. If you have any questions about the machine, do ask in the comments. Hit like if you found this video helpful, and subscribe if you'd like to support us and see more videos and reviews as we post them in the future. I will also be posting an upgrade guide for this machine, so do check that out if that is of interest to you. Thanks for watching.